Welcome into the Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Podcast Network. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News, joined as always by Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. And of course, you can get the Talkin Tide podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts. Catch us on Twitter. The feed there is Talkin_Tide. And of course, we are out there live on YouTube and Facebook as well. The Talkin Tide podcast brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier of Tuscaloosa. More on them a little bit later in the program. We are back again here for a Sunday nighter. It's going to be a relatively quick edition of Talkin Tide, Travis. But, here on Talkin Tide, Travis, we talk about it all, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. And certainly the baseball scandal surrounding the University of Alabama right now qualifies, I guess, as both bad and ugly. We will delve into that a little bit. Not too much else to talk about. It's been a quiet week for Alabama football and basketball for the most part. But to kick things off, Travis, just to kind of recap the facts a little bit, it's been I guess it's been 9 days now since the actual game that was swirled in controversy, an Alabama LSU game, an 8-6 LSU victory. A couple days later, the Ohio gambling regulators and authorities more or less take Alabama off the board with concerns about some funny money, I guess is the best way to put it, going down
suspicious
on that game
activity.
Yes,
as the man calls it. Yeah.
A couple other states followed suit. Kansas, I think, was one of them. Indiana, I think, was one of them. They weren't the only ones. I think there were a couple more. And next thing you know, Greg Byrne announces a termination of Alabama head baseball coach Brad Bohannon. He had been at Alabama since 2017, and credible reporting, in my opinion, has Brad Bohannon on the phone with an acquaintance as the bet was being placed on LSU. It apparently happened at the sports book at Great American Ballpark, which is where the Cincinnati Reds play. It's my understanding that there was a parlay actually placed that involved the Reds, so that would certainly make a little bit of sense. LSU to win over Alabama, and of course, what triggered this whole thing, Travis, is that along with these phone records that tie Bohannon to this bet and the timing of this bet being placed, an hour later, Luke Holman, Alabama's top starter, announced as a scratch. He doesn't go. And Alabama goes on to lose the game 8-6. All right, those are the facts, all right? Opinion-wise, Travis, my first thought on this thing is you feel terrible for Alabama's baseball players, for goodness sakes. What we're talking about here, and again, there are still some facts to come out. There are some details yet unknown. But at this point, it's fair to say that these players are dealing with a betrayal of the ultimate magnitude, really.
If what the reaction by UA was to the situation, and that was to dismiss Brad Bohannon, is indicative of maybe some things that this team has been dealing with, wholeheartedly agree, but also give a lot of credit to those same players. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a situation you want any team to find itself in, especially from the player perspective, or really these assistant coaches too. I mean, Jason Jackson, these guys, give them credit for this past weekend. And it's just been a surreal month or so, because you go back to the Auburn series, the game one of that, right before first pitch, we learn of a lawsuit involving a former Alabama player against Brad Bohannon. Then as you go into Thursday's opener against Vanderbilt, Brad Bohannon is relieved of his duties. I'll say this: these players handled it fine, because they won the Auburn series, and then they win the series against Vanderbilt. So again, Jim Jarvis, Drew Williamson, Andrew Pinckney, Dom Thomas. It's a pretty veteran team too in a lot of ways. So if this type of stuff was going to happen, and if these type of obstacles were going to be thrown in front of a team, this team seems to be able to handle it. And 11-13 in the league now after the series win over Vanderbilt. Who knows what else is going to come out? Like you talked about, I'm with you. I'd like some more blanks filled in. Obviously, at a minimum, it's a horrendous look. No matter how you try to explain it away, and how the connections can be made here in this day and age, whether it's video surveillance, whether it's, are you on a UA issued phone doing this stuff? I mean,
right.
Come on. Even
Right.
Urban Meyer knew, it's just a rough situation. But again, I'm like you. I feel mostly for the players, and I credit the players, because that was a damn good Vanderbilt team. They took 2 of 3 from, and a Vanderbilt team that they hadn't had much success with in the last 7-8 years or so, and not many teams have. And Vanderbilt's been really good.
They have, and what about Luke Holman, by the way? He was key with that win against Vanderbilt pretty much right when this scandal broke and Bohannon was out. Holman was on the mound, and Alabama took care of business against Vanderbilt, which I think is ranked 5th. So definitely a rallying moment for the Alabama baseball team. And you got to wonder too, Travis, common sense tells us that the likelihood that Brad Bohannon got caught up in this snare the first time is unlikely, right? The likelihood is that this has been going on for a while, and who knows how many times, who knows for how long, whether it's been weeks or months or years. But that's another element to this. And you said, as you pointed out, there's some questions that some blanks that we'd all like to have filled in still. One of them for me is, how far does this go back, and what else can be uncovered in terms of malfeasance, or messing with games, messing with scores, messing with outcomes on behalf of bettors. If this is something that's been going on for years, the public deserves to know, the players deserve to know, the fans deserve, everybody deserves to know if this thing runs deeper, and it damn well may.
Yeah, and I guess when you put $200K down on a college baseball game, it'll attract a little attention or something in that neighborhood anyway. And that's the great unknown, though. I mean, what is this? This Bohannon, this was his 6th year, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Right.
So now you bring everything into question. How far back does it go? But as much as anything, I still look at this team from the player perspective. They've won 3 out of their last 4 series in the SEC, even with all of this. So if it's been a intended sort of situation, it's been sporadic, it would seem like. And it's tough sport to bet on I mean, they all are. But no, I mean, it's just surreal, bizarre. I don't really know any other way to describe it. And then again, as I said, this is a team that still won 3 out of the last 4 series, sitting there at 11-13 in league play. Got to go to Texas A&M coming up. Got Ole Miss in Tuscaloosa to end the regular season before Hoover. Right now, this team is in great shape as far as RPI and those numbers for a regional bid. They're in right now. They're in Hoover. They're in the regional right now. It's just been that kind of season, it seems like, too, in the SEC in baseball. Right now, if the SEC tournament started today, Chase, the 2 teams that wouldn't qualify for the SEC tournament are the last 2 national champions. Mississippi State and Ole Miss wouldn't be in Hoover. So I guess at the end of the day, nothing really surprises me anymore when it comes to SEC baseball.
It doesn't get any crazier. Looking ahead for this Alabama baseball team, Travis, they got a midweeker against Troy on Tuesday night. That'll be played in Montgomery at Riverwalk Stadium. Following that, they're going to be on the road in College Station, taking on Texas A&M this weekend. That'll be Friday through Sunday. SEC Network Plus and SEC Network handling those broadcasts. And then, of course, they take on the aforementioned Ole Miss Rebels at home to close out the regular season. That'll be Thursday, Friday, Saturday the following week, which would be May 18th through the 20th. Also broadcast on SEC Network Plus. And then from there, of course, it's on to the SEC tournament and on to presumably the NCAA tournament as well. I believe right now Alabama is projected as a 3 seed to get things started anyway in the NCAA tournament. So it's not like they're going to be hosting anything, but it's a tough situation for the players, tough situation for Jackson too, as you mentioned. But it also makes you wonder if Alabama is maybe a little bit better team than we thought, right? Because if their success has been artificially suppressed by the head coach once or even more than once, then we're talking about a team that might be a little better than people thought. We'll see.
Yeah, and you start thinking about moves, right, from a Brad Bohannon perspective in game, especially, and probably more so as far as how you're handling pitchers, and definitely the scratch of Holman at LSU is one that, for obvious reasons, because it involved that specific game, is under the microscope right now. But there was also a series at Missouri. If Brad wasn't trying to push the buttons that he needed to ensure or give his team the best chance to win, I don't think he goes for a 9-out save with Alton Davis II at Missouri a couple weeks ago. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
If that's your guy, which Davis is right now, the left-hander out of the bullpen as your closer, and you need SEC wins and SEC series wins in game 1 or game 2 of a series like that, you're going to stretch your closer. He was trying to win that game. I know that, because
right.
You don't go to Alton Davis for a 9-out save if you're just playing around a little bit. So I guess with Holman at LSU, it's but then there were some other moves that I recall he made, and you're always going to be criticized in retrospect for how you handle bullpen, how you handle pitching changes. That's just how it goes. And but again, there were situations where I felt like, they're trying to win this game tonight, and this was before all this with the gambling stuff came out.
Yeah, and it's speculative to suggest that Bohannon might have been profiting from this. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Sometimes when it comes to this kind of thing, Travis, there could be favors involved. There can be threats involved. There can be quid pro quos involved, right? It's not necessarily it's not necessarily always a money thing for the guy doing something wrong. It's obviously a money thing for whoever's placing the bet. Yeah. But a lot can go into it. I know this. Brad Bohannon was making about $500,000 a year. Okay, so that's more than enough money not to need any money, unless you're doing something you shouldn't be doing.
But and we know people
we deal with.
We both have known people throughout the years that, not saying that Brad was in it to that extent, but people I've known personally that have gotten too far into it. Yep. It really was never about the money anyway. It ends up being about it at some point because you don't have it.
Right.
But, to start with, it's a competitive type situation. It's the adrenaline rush, all those things that go into play. And it's just interesting how college sports have come so far, and how you can really bet on pretty much anything, at this point. So, it's going to be fascinating to see how these next couple of weeks play out, because Alabama 11-13 in the league, Texas A&M 11-13 in the league. So that's a big series coming up in College Station. Talked about Mississippi State and Ole Miss, their struggles. Mississippi State still took a series from Alabama earlier in the season. So when you look at Ole Miss at 6-18 right now in the league, like Mississippi State, you can't just say, "Oh yeah, if you just win one at College Station, you can probably sweep Ole Miss." Well, maybe you can, but I don't think you can take anything for granted.
The Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Sports Network, brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier. Travis, tell us all about them.
Peterbrook Chocolatier. Last week I sounded the alarm a week early, but you know what? I probably made some people look really good to their moms because they went ahead early and got that Peterbrook Chocolatier chocolate for Mother's Day, because I always think of Mother's Day as being that first Sunday in May. Well, it's the second Sunday.
Fooled me for a week.
I know. Goodbread, he's sending me texts like, you want to do the show Sunday? I'm like, well, I may have sounded the alarm. But hey, look, that just gives you more time. Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard, north in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. All mamas love chocolate. And the best there is that Peterbrook Chocolatier. Tuscaloosa, Alabama, 1530 McFarland Boulevard, north in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa.
Talkin Tide podcast on the Belly Up Sports Network, the Twitter feed Talkin_Tide. I quickly want to thank one of our fine Talkin Tide listeners, big enough a fan of the show, Travis, that he donated this fine podcasting microphone that you see here on YouTube. Sent it my way to improve sound quality.
You've been cracked on
the
about
show.
the sound in the past. Yeah.
So Alfred C. Hop gets credit for sending this mic this way to Talkin Tide. We'll see how much better things sound. Hopefully a little bit more of a rich sound coming from yours truly here on the podcast tonight and forevermore. So.
Love it.
Yeah, back in, Travis, not a whole lot to talk about as we discussed. Rough semester, though, let's face it, for Alabama Director of Athletics Greg Byrne. Travis, you have the basketball scandal, and scandal's a fair word, certainly, for what happened there. You have a baseball scandal, and scandal is a very fair word for what's going on there. Some other issues kind of piled on this semester as well, but overall, fair to say, I think Greg Byrne will be pleased to get this academic year over and done with, right?
And it's also a reason why, like coaches these days, you don't see ADs stay in one place for 10, 12, 15 years anymore, do you? I mean, they moved pretty good too. And this isn't to say that'll be the case with Byrne anytime soon, but it has. It's been taxing, I'm sure. And look, at the end of the day, how many other ADs have had to deal with a baseball coach situation like this? And then obviously there's the horrendous events involving the basketball team and the men's program. I do think in some areas, especially with the basketball scandal, UA could have, I'm sure, and even feels like in retrospect, handled some things differently.
Absolutely.
From an administrative perspective.
From a PR perspective.
Well, exactly. And that to me goes back to administration, how you administrate the situation. But there literally is no playbook, no manual for what has happened here in the last 5 or 6 months. So you just hope that it's very much an unwanted, unheeded learning experience for some folks. But yeah, you said it. He's ready to turn the page, get this thing to May, June, into the summer, and look ahead to the 2023-2024 year.
How about, as we close things out, Travis, just a bit of good news. Montana Fouts, the Alabama softball pitching ace, comes up with a perfect game of victory over Ole Miss, a 6-inning perfect game, 6 strikeouts in the performance for Fouts. Can't say enough about her. Has not been a banner year necessarily for Alabama softball. I think they're 13-9 in the SEC right now. They're used to being a little better than that in league play, but Montana Fouts with that performance just continue. she's already as good a pitcher as Alabama's ever had, but she
Yeah.
just continues to cement it in different ways.
Yeah, she's at the top of the pitcher list for me anyway, and they've had some great ones. I mean, Alexis Osorio, Jackie Traina, Steph Van Brakel, Prothrow, you name it. It goes on and on. Now, to me, in softball, and probably even I think in baseball, some people do this, but the pitcher in softball is everything. It really is. So if you start making lists of greatest players of all time or program history, you're probably going to have to look at a pitcher. Although I'll say this, Kelly Creshman, if you want to talk about a positional player, she's at the top. I mean, she's the all-timer for me in Alabama softball. And again, another area where you've had just give Murph all the credit. I mean, it's just been one great player after another. And, it's kind of bittersweet. It's especially bittersweet because Montana's been this good for so long that you start thinking about next year. And part of the problem this year is that you don't see maybe the next Montana coming already on the staff for next year because they're pretty much a win. Yeah, they win 2 out of 3 in a league series in large part because of Montana. They don't sweep because the gap between Montana and their 2/3 is it's a wide gulf. So
sizable.
Yeah, it's great to see her do what she's doing right now, but it's concerning also. And that's understanding Murph's always had another one coming. That's one thing you can say about Murph. I don't know if it'll be via a freshman or maybe it's a transfer portal addition or 2, but still some time to figure that out and just enjoy Montana Fouts while you can because it's an all-time situation.
All right, that's a wrap here. As we said, an abbreviated edition of the Talkin Tide podcast for Travis Reier, the longtime senior analyst at BamaOnline.com. I'm Chase Goodbread, sports columnist with the Tuscaloosa News. We're coming to you from the Belly Up Sports Network, and we'll talk to you next time right here on Talkin Tide.